Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. My name is Shamika Klassen. I'm a first-year PhD student at CU Boulder. I am presenting alongside Dr. Xeturah Woodley, who's an associate professor at the New Mexico State University. And today we're going to be talking about Technowomanism, examining protest and social justice in the Technosphere. So our journey today, we're going to be looking at justice issues intersecting with the digital space. We're going to be exploring waves of womanism. This is a picture of Alice Walker. And we're also going to be introducing and offering Technowomanism as a framework. So initiated as a hashtag on Facebook in 2012 after the killing of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin by 3 Black female people, some of whom identify as queer, the Black Lives Matter movement began. This is just a very small, unfortunately small collection of some of the hashtags that bubbled up out of the Black Lives Matter movement. There's Michael Brown, hands up, Eric Garner, I can't breathe, Sandra Bland, say her name, and Tamir Rice, to Miss Rice. This is now a worldwide organization committed to an identity of Blackness, a spectrum of genders and sexuality, and justice for all. There's also a concerted effort to invite a celebration of Blackness as part of the movement's agenda. Now to move on to an issue that happened starting back in 2014, when Anita Sarkeesian became embroiled in Gamergate and began receiving an overwhelming amount of vitriolic harassment online, such as weaponized pornography, rape and death threats, and others, she went to the police to report what she was experiencing on platforms like Twitter. She then had to explain to police what Twitter was. Like many marginalized people who experience harassment in the digital space, she was asked what she did to elicit the responses, and in some cases was told to just leave those spaces altogether. When the Me Too movement began to swell, its momentum opened up enough space for survivors of many kinds to feel emboldened to share their story. In a sea of women finally being heard, actor Terry Crews used Twitter to speak up and out about his experiences with sexual harassment. My argument is that we need new tools for analyzing and engaging social justice and technology. There's the saying of putting new wine in old wineskins. Well, the old frameworks that we have aren't necessarily as robust for these new experiences of social justice issues that are occurring in and around the digital space. There's a quote here from Malcolm Gladwell from The New Yorker in an article that he wrote, "Small change, the revolution will not be tweeted," in which he said, 50 years after one of the most extraordinary episodes of social upheaval in American history, we seem to have forgotten what activism is. This was written in 2010. I imagine he has something different to say today. But now we're going to look at womanism. So what is womanism? In 1983, Alice Walker wrote In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, A Womanist Prose, in which she defined womanism in 4 ways. So a womanist loves men or women sexually or non-sexually. A womanist seeks wholeness for all individuals, including herself. A womanist loves the spirit, the folk, the struggle, and herself, all regardless. And what most people pull from the definition of womanism is a womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender. Now there are 3 waves of womanism, in particular womanist ethics. The first wave was an application of the term womanist in religious thought, and the key players include women like Dolores Williams, Katie Cannon, and Jacqueline Grant. In the second wave, there was development of its respective disciplines and establishments of normative womanist disclosure, and delved deeper into the theological reflection based on Black women's experiences. While key players include Kelly Brown Douglas, this wave is also described as largely Christian, heteronormative, and detached from local and global political movements. And the third wave, womanism challenges the identity politics of the second wave, and it's more of an ideology politic than an identity politic. According to Monica Coleman, third wave womanism engages the religious lives of women of African descent, maintains a goal of justice, survival, freedom, liberation, and/or quality of life, and understands itself to both draw upon and depart from a tradition of womanist and religious scholarship. It also engages work and thinkers both inside and outside of Black religious scholarship. By opening up the ideology of womanism outside of Black feminists and feminists of color, Holman introduces the possibility that wholeness through womanist critique is available to all. Enter Technowomanism. Technowomanism is an interdisciplinary womanist theoretical approach to analyzing, understanding, and experiencing and explaining the intersectional nature of the human experience within and outside of the digital space, as well as in and around technology. Having laid the foundation for what womanism is as a theological and ethical framework that functions as the basis of technowomanism, we now move to the scaffolding of technowomanism, which is comprised of various perspectives ranging from critical race theory to feminist gender, woman studies, as well as social sciences such as sociology and humanities like history. By folding in these disciplines, we expand the tool set we have for analyzing, understanding, and explaining the phenomena that technowomanism is accurately interested in. Next, we turn to intentionality, intentionally selecting the description of intersectionality. In 1989, Black feminist scholar Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term to encompass the reality of possessing multiple marginalized identities, such as being Black and a woman and queer, for example, which each come with their own discrimination and prejudice. The intersectional framework exposes how these different identities and their respective injustices are woven together. Crenshaw was inspired to define intersectionality because of a court case in which a Black woman was suing a manufacturing company for not hiring her. The judge noted that the company hired Black men for manufacturing jobs, so there was ostensibly no basis for racism, and white women were hired for administrative work, so the claim for gender discrimination, according to the judge, could not be made either. But the company would not hire the Black woman for either a manufacturing job or an office job. The Black woman stood at the intersection of race and gender, which was and continues to be a blind spot for the social justice system. Finally, these aspects of one identity are now being carried into our digital versions and technological engagements. By bringing bits and bytes into the interdisciplinary conversation of womanism and intersectionality, we're bringing focus to a part of our lives that increasingly becomes facilitated through screens. The exploration of how our intersectional lives are lived in the digital and technological space is indeed a frontier. There is so much yet to learn about ourselves and the technosphere around us, and when you have a different lens with which you view, you can drastically alter what you see. So let's revisit those first three moments of social justice in the digital space. First, looking at the Black Lives Matter movement. Kimberly Crenshaw performs an exercise across the country with groups of varying sizes and backgrounds. She asks everyone to stand and begins to list names. As soon as an audience member hears a name they do not know, they sit. After listing 4 names, all Black men killed by state-sanctioned violence, half of her TEDx Talk audience remains standing. By the time she finishes the next 4 names, also of Black people killed by state-sanctioned violence, only 4 people remain standing. The only difference between the 2 groups of names was their gender. The quote, the hashtag Say Her Name grew out of the Black Lives Matter movement, just as Black feminism and womanism grew out of feminism and Black liberation theology, respectively. Combating the erasure of Black women from national conversation directly addresses the intersectionality women of color are facing in this discussion. So that is the work that they're doing in this space. As a Black man who experienced public sexual assault, Terry Crews is one in a long line of Black men who have been objectified as bulls or portrayed as brutes. Womanism calls for the survival and wholeness of all people, and techno-womanism sees both as achievable and through digital spaces. By breaking his story on Twitter, Crews took advantage of the moment as it was constructed to engage with the public and seek to address his own personal struggle. Just as a womanist is not a separatist except for health, a techno-womanist welcomes all survivors as they feel moved and also encourages people to step offline or separate as they feel called. And finally, there's a lot of conversation around Gamergate harassment that is similar to that around sexual harassment, which involves victim blaming. Instead of seeing victims, let's instead recognize survivors. Also, blaming survivors shifts the focus and onus away from perpetrators. Seeking wholeness for all, on and offline, means looking at the trolls and attackers and wondering what can be done to bring them wholeness away from the brokenness out of which their actions surely lie. Using the wisdom of womanism and applying it to technology as well as within the digital space, we can better aim for wholeness for everyone on and offline. I now leave the floor for questions and discussion.